Listen, I did film and television studies at university for 3 years. I spent hours reading countless books and articles on subjects spanning from film all the way to television. Not a single one mentioned Hugh Grant once.
I achieved the hardest qualification across any university or college ever, a 2-1 in history. Let me tell you, the only thing that I learned was that we, as a society, have a history of denying and neglecting Hugh Grant's artistic and cultural relevance, not just in this country, but in the entire world.
I met Oscar at a Hugh Grant-themed event I put on at the Students' Union.
It felt as though Diggory and I were the only ones there, and we agreed that there was a Hugh Grant-shaped hole in academia.
We decided to put it right ourselves. We want to show people that he's an icon in acting.
We want to show people he's more than just a bumbling posh guy.
I'm Diggory Waite.
And I'm Oscar Beardmore Gray. And this is...
Taking Hugh for Granted.
Hello, you're listening to Taking Hugh for Granted, the show in which two friends watch every single film starring Hugh Grant and ask the simple question, is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own, or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? This week, like every week, I'm joined by Oscar Beardmore Gray. Oscar, say hello.
Hello.
How are you doing, Oscar?
I'm very well. I'm very, very excited to review this one. This time not a film, a TV series. But I've just spent literally the last 24 hours absorbed in a very English scandal, and I'm so excited to get into this one.
Well, absolutely, so am I. And I've got 3 questions for you, 3 quick-fire questions. Oscar, do you like politics?
Yes, I dabble.
Oscar, do you like history?
I do. I actually am a scholar of history among Hugh Grant and other things.
And do you like Hugh Grant?
Do I like Hugh Grant? I love Hugh Grant.
Well, do I have the TV show for you? Synopsis, Simon Haynes, take it away.
A Very English Scandal, directed by Stephen Frears, written by John Preston and Russell T. Davis, and shown across 3 episodes in 2018. Based on real events, British Liberal Party leader Jeremy Thorpe, played by Hugh Grant, is accused of conspiracy to murder his ex-lover Norman Scott, played by Ben Wishaw, and is forced to stand trial in 1979.
Right, Oscar, how exciting. It's our first television show that we've done so far for Hugh. And he's done some back in the day. Some of his early works, his television, and we were going to stick to his films, but this one just seemed too good to pass up on.
Yeah, definitely too good to pass up on. Hugh hasn't done a whole lot of TV work, but I think we may see more TV work from him because this one has just got such good reviews and it's such a good watch.
Absolutely. It's funny enough, I was watching an interview with him earlier where he said he got a script from Stephen Frears, who he'd worked with a few years earlier on Florence Foster Jenkins, and he said he sent the script through and he realised, he was like, hang on, there's 3 scripts here. This isn't TV, is it? And they were like, yeah. And he was like, oh God. And it wasn't. It's just because he's a snob, and he literally said it's because of my snobbery. I just don't want to do TV. But as we always start with, Oscar, what do you think of Hugh's look in this film?
His look is convincing a look as I've seen in anything he's been in. So he's playing Jeremy Thorpe, who is a sort of, archetypal posh boy, bloody Eton educated posh boy, and and he's a smart politician, tweed jackets, suits every day, and he's got the perfect combed over look, but in that kind of grandpa British politician style, and he just absolutely owns it. And one of the things I keep on going back to with this TV series is that I actually believe Hugh is Jeremy Thorpe. You're watching this and you completely forget about the fact that he's Hugh Grant.
It is my duty to inform the Prime Minister that if he continues to restrict immigration, he is staunching the lifeblood of this country and fueling the rise of the Keep Britain White campaign. Citizens from all over the Commonwealth deserve a free and safe right of entry, or else the government may find that its white paper is very aptly named.
I was watching this programme, and there's moments where I go, oh my God, that's Hugh Grant. And because I will have just forgotten. you'll see what we call the Hugh Grantisms. You know, they'll seep through at moments, and you'll remember. You'll go, "Oh my God, that's Hugh Grant." Otherwise, you are totally under this spell. It seems that a little trilby hat, these brown contact lenses, and these amazing suits, and the way he carries himself and the way he speaks. That's all it takes, and he's completely a chameleon. He's completely someone else.
I hadn't noticed the brown contact lenses actually, because of course he's well known for his beautiful blue eyes.
Indeed.
Brilliant makeup and brilliant characterization, which probably jumps quite well into the next point that we always talk about, which is, what do you make of his character and performance, Diggs?
His character is such a fascinating one, because I suppose I don't know if he's played many characters where he just has to imitate someone. He said this is very good, and if you watch any interviews on this, I'm sure he'll tell the story. He tells it a couple of times. When he was preparing for the role, because he's playing a real life person, he said to himself, well, I'm quite good at doing impressions, so all I've got to do is just watch them on YouTube a bit. And that's what he did. He watched them on YouTube and thought to himself, oh God, I can do a bloody good impression here, so I'm sort of sorted. And then he remembered, he went, oh fuck, Ben Wishaw's in this film, I'll have to actually do some proper acting. He'll be properly acting.
So I then went through the whole active process of who is he and where did he come from, and all that stuff, and then just did an imitation really.
Going back to his character, Jeremy Thorpe is a closeted homosexual. He's an educated, well-to-do, high-profile politician, and he has two sides of him. He has this well-to-do, very well-mannered man, and it comes out at the end of the first episode and the beginning of the second one, this horrible menace to him.
Well, in that case, there's only one thing we can do. Kill him.
No, if only we could.
No, I mean it. We kill him, and we have him killed.
That'd be ridiculous.
He will destroy me, and the party, and my marriage. What if the next person he talks to is a journalist?
For God's sake, Jeremy, we're members of Parliament. We can't sit here and discuss murder.
No worse than shooting a sick dog.
It's the damn sight worse.
I really don't care. I don't care if we shoot him, or we strangle him, or we poison him, or we bludgeon him, or we tie him up in a sack and drop him in the Thames. There is only one way for us to survive. Norman Scott has got to die, so how?
There's one word I think I'd use to describe his character, which is reptilian. He plays this kind of
Komodo dragon.
Yeah, exactly. He's got this evil streak to him that we've come to know, and how brilliantly that Hugh plays these roles. He plays this evil character so well, and like we see in Paddington 2, which of course we've got to talk about in this review, because that's the first. Yeah. Him and Ben Wishaw are the stars of that show. Of that film, and now we see him again in A Very English Scandal. So I think it's absolutely brilliant.
It really is. That's actually, again, another funny thing. This is the thing he did right after filming Paddington. So Hugh Grant comes off the back of a film in which Ben Wishaw is this lovable little bear, and then he has to go into a film where he sodomizes that bear and tries to kill it again.
I know. There's some great content on Twitter that I've seen in the last few weeks of some fans talking quite a lot about how exactly that point that Hugh is basically is after Ben Wishaw and everything that he does. He just wants to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. And wants him in whatever way he can, whether that's in the bedroom or in a morgue. There were a few Hugh Grantisms in there, like I say. Like I realised he does a little run, which is like a half-hearted run, but that's kind of prevalent in a lot of his films. And his smile is when I kept noticing him in this as well. When I saw him, it sounds like I'm in love with. I mean, I am in love with him. Which is why I wanted to mention Ben Wishaw as well, because I remember a few years ago when I had this is my now ex-girlfriend, but some listeners will be shocked to hear I've ever had a girlfriend. I was watching one of the new James Bonds with her family, and her little sister came out of the film and went, "You were in that," and I was like, "Who was I?" And she was like, "I don't know." And then her mum was like, "The quartermaster Q is played by Ben Wishaw." So people often say I'm like Ben Wishaw, and so to see Ben Wishaw get with Hugh Grant in this film, as someone who looks a bit like Ben Wishaw, I have to say I was.
You do look a little bit like him. I can see the resemblance.
So I want Hugh Grant
Ben Wishaw, then, I think we need to have a moment for him, because I thought he put in a very, very good performance as well.
He did, and he awarded great prizes for his performance as well, which I think is pissed me off a little bit, because Hugh was nominated for a lot of awards and only nominated, didn't win. Whereas Ben Wishaw won an Emmy, a Golden Globe, and a BAFTA for Best Supporting Actor in his role. And nothing against Ben Wishaw. I thought he absolutely smashed this out of the park. This performance, he played he was so convincing at this kind of mentally unstable and broken character who is so desperate to get back and get his revenge on a politician, and slightly deluded, but also clearly fighting with himself about his own sort of character and sexuality. But yeah, I think Hugh was just as good in this as Ben, but perhaps maybe it's because Ben was playing the best supporting actor. He won all the accolades.
It was actually very, very interesting. I was speaking before today, actually, to Synopsis Simon, not Synopsis Simon Haynes, Synopsis Simon, and he, back in the day, he interviewed people left, right and centre, and he interviewed both of these people. He met Jeremy Thorpe on a number of occasions and interviewed him, and also met Norman Scott. Synopsis Simon knows these people, and he said, Hugh Grant, he was spooked. He was like, it's uncanny how good Hugh Grant's impression was. However, he met Norman Scott, and Norman Scott closer to the time when all this kicked off, and he was like, unfortunately, Ben Wishaw's performance is fantastic, but it's not true to what Norman Scott is or was actually like. But in some ways, I think Ben Wishaw's, the way he plays the role, if you think of it as a role and what that role needs to represent, I think Ben Wishaw does a fantastic job. Whereas, you can't stray too far from what Jeremy Thorpe is, because Jeremy Thorpe, back in the day, there were 3 TV channels, and Jeremy Thorpe was the leader of one of the main parties. At one point, as we know, almost in power because of a hung parliament. So, this is he was a huge character, so you can't stray too much from what he was actually like. Whereas Norman Scott, over time, people forget.
Yeah, well, that's amazing that Synopsis Simon interviewed these two guys, because the character of Norman Scott is slightly maybe skewed a little bit, because actually he was interviewed by Irish News a few years ago, and he said, I was portrayed as this poor mincing little gay person. I also came across as a weakling, and I've never been a weakling. So I think there was, like you said, a little bit of leeway in the way that Ben Whishaw played the character, but of course, like you said, Hugh actually had to play Jeremy Thorpe as close to Jeremy Thorpe, because a lot of people actually know what he was like.
And just to go back as well, it was a big deal, and it's often referred to as Britain's OJ trial.
This was a seriously big deal. Basically, one of the top 3 or 4 politicians in the country has conspired to kill his lover, just so he can hide it all away, and then covers it up and does all kinds of naughty things, and then it goes on trial.
Well, you're listening to Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted on the radio. Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted. Oh, the podcast show.
A couple more people to mention then. Oscar, take it away.
The first of which is Blake Harrison, who is often better known for his role in The Inbetweeners. For those fans out there who don't know what The Inbetweeners was, this was probably the smash hit TV series of Diggory and I's youth. It's for outrageous teenagers who are living basically your standard Middle England life as a teenager, causing mischief everywhere, and it's so outrageously rude, and I think that's why it was such a hit. So anyway, Blake Harrison has got a bit of a cult following because of that, and here he is playing Andrew Newton, who is the man that Jeremy Thorpe has hired to kill Norman Scott, and I think he played it pretty well. Diggs, what do you reckon?
I completely agree. I mean, so this is why it's called, in some ways, a very English scandal, because the hit that's put out to kill Norman Scott is such a fucking botch job. This guy that Neil, we will now refer to him as Neil because that's his name in The Inbetweeners. He was such a useless hitman that he spent 2 nights in Dunstable in Bedfordshire instead of Barnstable in Devon, because he just got the...
Was that bit true?
That bit is true. According to evidence heard in court, Andrew Newton did in fact spend 2 nights in Dunstable, Bedfordshire, instead of Barnstable in Devon, where he was supposed to carry out the hit. The towns are 200 miles away from each other. So I mean, this guy is fucking useless, and it culminates in the point where, you know, he has his gun out, and it's a 1910 or 1911 Luger, and it's pouring down with rain. He points the gun at Norman Scott.
Come on now. Come on now. Come on, girl. Yes, my darling. Mwah, mwah.
Oh my God. It's you. Your turn.
He misses. He hits his fucking dog. So the dog dies. And then tries to fire again because it's such an old gun, because it's raining and stuff. It jams. And Norman can get away. Going back to his particular performance, I think it was a great bit of casting because he played it quite well. Really quite well.
There is a moment, though, I have to say, that for a while you just can't really take him seriously because it's Neil, who is the world's stupidest character. In the in-between, he is the dumbest person you've ever seen on screen.
Which is why it kind of worked here. It really did, because, you know, he was doing a lot of these stupid things, and you sort of thought, well, yeah, this is you. This is the sort of thing that you do. I really liked how the character, though, you know, he was a drunk former airline pilot out of work, and this is in real life as well. And, you know, he just the guy didn't know what he was doing, so he's driving along the road with Norman next to him in the car, and he's really cut up about what he has to do. He's really scared and he's really nervous. And I think, so, you know, so one moment you're laughing at how useless he is, and the next moment you're thinking, oh fuck, I kind of feel for this guy. He's just sort of out of his depth here, and he said he'd do something when he was drunk, and I thought he played it really well.
Look out the window. Look out the window. Look out the window. It's Hugh Grant in a Pret.
So, Diggs, maybe we should move on to the one other person that we wanted to bring up briefly, which is George Carmen, who is played by Adrian Scarborough.
This is a very English podcast and British podcast. We know him more as Pete from Gavin and Stacey, the hapless, useless, spineless man who really has no clue what he's doing. In this, he plays a relentless barrister and also a drunk and a fiend as well. And I have to say, he played the role fantastically. Once again, much like with Jeremy Thorpe and Hugh Grant playing him, I totally forgot I was watching Pete from Gavin and Stacey. I thought he was great. And again, another fascinating character.
And I thought that the little bit as well, where he sort of admits to Hugh that he himself has had homosexual tendencies, was a good message for the whole of the series, where it was basically like there are a lot of people in establishment who've been covering up their secrets for a long time. And I just thought that was a really poignant moment in the whole series.
It really, really was. That moment really, really hit home. And I'm really glad you mentioned that, because the real life Norman Scott, when the filmmakers went to see him, always maintained that he hated Jeremy Thorpe and they hated each other and they'd never loved each other properly. They showed him episode 3, and in episode 3, Pete from Gavin and Stacey asked Hugh Grant, why him? Why, there were plenty of men, we've all done it. Why did you pick him?
Well, I would imagine, if you do know those men, George, then you know those knights. And you know how those nights can end.
Touch me, dirty queer! Fuck! Touch me!
Oh, no! Take it! Take it! Just take it!
Like that. Given those men, it may be, I suppose, one could imagine, that Norman Scott was the best.
At that moment in real life, when they showed that to the real life Norman Scott, must have been a couple of years ago, apparently he broke down crying. And Russell T Davies had to put his arm around himself, and I think that's very, very poignant. You can read into that what you will, but maybe that's where he really felt that the truth had come out, and that was a moment that Russell T Davies said, that I know that conversation. There's no record of that happening. A lot of this TV show, there's loads of stuff that happened, but I thought I had to put that in there. And clearly it meant a lot, and it was right to put it in there because of the way that Norman Scott reacted.
This was such a great scandal, but at the end of the day, it was because Jeremy Thorpe wasn't able to be an openly gay man in a position of power, and it's easy to forget that being gay was illegal until 1967, I believe, in the UK. So, but yeah, I thought that was very poignant, and also the way that the trial played out and how clearly biased the judge was to the fact that, I think he called, and it's true, it's absolutely true that he called Scott in the Old Bailey, which is the greatest criminal court perhaps in the world. He called Scott
a hysterical, warped personality, an accomplished sponger, very skillful at exciting and exploiting sympathy. Spineless, neurotic character, addicted to self-advertisement. He is a crook. He is a fraud. He is a sponger. He is a whiner. He is a parasite.
But of course, he could be telling the truth if it's a question of belief. So he's basically just saying that this guy's bonkers. He's some, queer guy who is trying to bring down someone of esteemed public record. And that really probably sealed the fate of the trial and got Thorpe off basically scot-free.
He got off scot-free.
Yo, Jeremy Thorpe, he got off scot-free. Yeah, Norman Scott-free. Do you feel me? Woo! Yeah, I know it's scot-free. He got off scot-free. Yo, Jeremy Thorpe met a boy called Scott. He took him to his mum's where they really hit it off. They had some naughty fun with a pot of Vaseline, but at the time that sort of fun was unlawfully obscene. Jeremy kept Scott in a little flat in London. Okay. Scott wasn't happy because Thorpe didn't visit often enough. They called time on it, but it wasn't a very nice or gracious split. Because Thorpe wouldn't give Scott his work permit. Getting Scott killed was Thorpe's last resort, but he fucked it up, so they went to court. Scot-free. He got off scot-free. Can you imagine that? Nothing. Tried to kill him. Got off scot-free. Unbelievable. Awful.
I think another good thing to point out as well is in this round table I saw, they were talking about how Norman Scott kind of comes out at the end of it, kind of like a bit of a hero when he walks out, even though, Jeremy Thorpe wasn't put in prison. When Norman Scott walks out, he's got lots of people there just cheering for him, and he kind of, you come away and you think, God, this guy's a bit of a hero here. He's the guy standing up for, I suppose, gay rights. And it was interesting because Russell T Davies was talking about how this is a man in the 60s when it was illegal to be gay, was walking through, the Welsh countryside and sat in a pub where, and being very, very overtly and openly gay. And, he was saying it's probably quite hard to do that now, let alone back then when it was actually illegal to. This is a real incredible guy and not someone to be fucked with, as Jeremy Thorpe found out, which I thought was fucking sick. And that came across well in this show.
Kudos again to writing, great directing. Russell T Davies is well known as a gay man, so it's probably particularly poignant. I think he talked about how, as a young gay man who was still in the closet, this was the most high-profile sort of homosexual story out there and known. So he was always fascinated by it.
I remember him saying, it's very poignant, he said, I think after Doctor Who, he wrote Doctor Who, and he said, one of the biggest things he'll ever do, if not the biggest. And he said, from now on, though, as a gay man, I have a responsibility. I'm going to write gay scripts. Everyone else has written about this story. They've been former politicians, they've been journalists, they've been historians. Now it's time for a gay person to write it. I mean, look, I can't really comment on how much that had an effect, but it was fucking good. So I had a good time with it. Yeah.
Smashed it.
Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted.
Taking Heath for granted. What did you think, lads? Were they taking Heath for granted?
I think this one is going to be quite a quick. We don't need a whole trial to work out here what Oscar and I are going to say. But Oscar, I'm going to ask you anyway. Is this television program taking Hugh for granted?
Diggs, this is an absolute masterclass and a true showing of the Hugh Naissance. We saw Paddington 2. We saw A Very English Scandal. We've seen The Gentleman. This is just proof in the pudding that the Hugh Naissance is well and truly on. This show got 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm starting to sound Canadian. Tomatoes. And yeah, it's actually quite a nice circle back, I think, to one of Hugh's first films is a film called Maurice, where he also plays a gay man in the 1920s, and here we are 30 years later, Hugh as a 60-year-old man pretty much playing one of the most high-profile scandals in British establishment life, and he absolutely has it on point. It's so good. The claim for this show has been brilliant. And I think, as the British public at least, or and the wider world of film critics and film lovers out there have realised that there are strings to Hugh's bow that aren't just romantic comedies. And I think that's really important to get out there. And yeah, I just absolutely loved it. And I was hooked from start to finish. I was thinking, it's a 3-part series. Of Christ, I don't know if I have time to watch that this weekend. And I was sat there wanting to, watch it all straight on the bounce. I absolutely loved it. I probably haven't left enough for you to say, but I'm sure you've got a few words of your own opinion of what you thought of this. I
mean, I think, and I've said this before on the podcast, but I think this is Hugh's greatest performance. And I know I've said that before, but this really could well be Hugh's greatest performance, just because he would just every now and then he'd smile at me, or he'd walk in a certain way and I'd go, oh God, that's Hugh, that's my Hugh. And I'd forget otherwise. This is it's just a fantastic performance. It's a fantastic character. He's funny, but also there's menace in there. There's real feeling in what he says. The writing is great. There's lots of fun cameos. I like the fact that it's 3 episodes long. It does feel very English. It does feel very British, which I have to say, weirdly, I felt kind of a weird sense of national pride watching this, even though I don't think the British come across very well. But we go to Wales, we go to Devon, we go to London, we go all over the shop. We go to when they say they go to California. That was actually filmed on a bloody beach in
Devon,
in Cornwall.
Yeah.
Oh, was it Devon as well?
Yeah. I thought that was brilliant. They did that pretty well, actually.
It was sweet. It was a good. It was a good try.
Malibu, but
No, exactly. I just saw the bank and I was like, really? You expect me to think that's California? If you haven't seen this yet, go away and watch it. It might not be the Hugh that you know, but you'll come away and think, bloody hell, this guy is good at his craft.
I don't think I could fault you on that opinion. I had in my notes, honestly, maybe his best performance ever. There's not much you can fault here. Brilliant.
No, absolutely not. Well, if you haven't seen it, go away and watch it. And otherwise, I think that's another episode in the bag.
It's very sad to be ending this episode because I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Instagram, we're at Taking Hugh for Granted. We're on Twitter, at Taking Hugh. We're on Facebook, at Taking Hugh for Granted. You can email us, takinghughforgranted@gmail.com. You can, if you wanted to, if you left us an iTunes review, apparently people do that. That'd be fantastic. If you leave a 5-star review, we're going to read you out on the podcast. We're going to read out your name. We'll give you a shout out because it really helps us out. So if you leave a 5-star review, prepare for that to happen. So thank you so much, everyone, once again for listening. And we will see you next time for more Hugh. What a great... I might watch it again.
Yeah. Maybe we watch it together.
Let's do it. Bye.
Bye. For copyright reasons, the producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. We simply review Mr. Grant's films and hope to shine light upon some of the lesser-known classics from his illustrious career. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.